Hello, everyone. My name is Kirk Bachman, and welcome back to The Ultimate Dish. Today, we are thrilled to welcome Chef Jesse Ito, co-owner of Royal Sushi and Izakaya in Philadelphia. A first-generation Japanese Korean American, Jesse grew up in his family's restaurant, Fuji, a Japanese restaurant in New Jersey with a cult following. Starting as an after-school dishwasher at age 14, he spent more than a decade working alongside his father, Masaharu Ito, a celebrated chef, training in everything from prep and pastry to tempura and fish butchery. Chef Jesse began working at Fuji full-time in 2007 and soon took charge of the restaurant's sushi bar. He began developing his own personal style and customer base and tinkering with the idea of opening his own restaurant. And that idea became reality in 2016 when Jesse did, in fact, open the beloved Royal Sushi and Izakaya, bringing his dad in as chef, partner, and tamagoyaki guru. The restaurant is a lively, unfussy hub for Japanese comfort food and punchy cocktails. We'll talk about punchy cocktails in a moment. Tucked behind a curtain is Chef Jesse's 8-seat sushi counter, where he prepares the full 17-course Omakase menu himself nightly. Since opening Royal, Chef Jesse has been named Eater Young Gun and one of Zagat's 30 Under 30. He has also received 7 award nominations from the James Beard Foundation, most recently as a finalist for Best Chef Mid-Atlantic 2024. And Jesse's creativity doesn't stop in the kitchen. He's also a photographer, a ceramicist, and a budding yogi. And with his second restaurant in Rittenhouse on the horizon, we'll talk about that later, his culinary journey shows no sign of slowing down. In this episode, we'll explore Jesse's journey with his father's influence, the vision behind his restaurants, and how he prioritizes mental health in a fast-paced hospitality world. And I'm completely out of breath. Welcome to the show, Chef. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I need to carry you around with that intro. You can intro me everywhere.
Can I do that? Can I need a little practice, but it is it's impressive, absolutely impressive. And let's just talk a little bit about where I'm in Boulder, Colorado. You're in Philly. We talked a little bit of sports before we got going. We'll get back to that, but set the stage for us a little bit. You look like you're in a high rise. Are you in the city, outside of the city, close to the restaurant?
Yeah, I live right in the heart of the city. I live in Rittenhouse, which is where all the like skyscrapers are, offices are. And I am not too close to Royal Izakaya. I kind of remove myself a bit. You need a little distance.
You have to, right? Yeah.
I'm a block away from the new restaurant, Dancerobot. So, I'll be overseeing that construction and everything. So, got to be close.
That's great. That's great. When we get to that, I'd really like to dive into how you can balance all of that, given the fact that you spend so much time in the restaurant. I do have to give a big hello from Natalia, who was on our show, ironically, yesterday. And many of our listeners probably know her as the owner-operator of Midnight Pasta. And so she says hello, and she's super, super excited and frequents your establishment. With that as a backdrop, we talked a lot with her yesterday about the super, super cool Philadelphia food scene, right? Her perspective, talking to you today, we know Mark Vetri, Pizza King, and so on and so forth, and so much more.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the Philadelphia food scene today? Eli Culp has been on the show, great fan, great friend. Any thoughts on Philly from you?
Yeah. Well, speaking of Mark, I've known Mark since I was a kid.
No way. No way.
Yeah, Mark and his partner Jeff Benjamins. They were going to my dad's restaurant for decades.
No way. Isn't that what a small world? Wow.
Actually had their staff party there in the 90s at my dad's restaurant.
Isn't that something?
Yeah, I've known them forever. What to say about the Philly food scene? So I would say, Philly is like a world-class food city at this point. And it's definitely garnered that reputation nationally, and people respect it now. For a long time, we were just considered the underdogs, and other larger cities would kind of scoff that, like, what does Philly have to offer compared to us? We're so close to New York, DC, Then there's LA, SF, Miami. Um, but especially in the past, I would say 5 years, it's just exploded on the national scene. I mean, so many James Beard wins. Philly's just dominated year after year. I have yet
Yeah.
to win. I'm there for the ride, representing. Um, we have world class chefs, some of the best chefs of many different cuisines. You mentioned Mark Vetri for Italian. And there's also just a great camaraderie amongst us all. And it's a small, big city. So everyone kind of knows each other. And you have to, it kind of also grounds you as a chef in a restaurant that you have to be real. Like, this market does not support fluff. If it's no matter, it has to offer value, no matter what the price point, whether it be expensive or cheap, it has to be value, right? Otherwise, the people here aren't going to support it. And I think that's what makes Philadelphia special, because you have to be exceptionally talented to succeed here.
I love that. Natalia said the similar, right? Also, this idea that in Philadelphia you can actually get into a restaurant, even if it's just at the bar. You can actually get a reservation and enjoy yourself, right? So it's
Yeah.
not just about a 3 or 6 month wait list to get into a place, right? Which could be gone by the time you get there. So no, that's great. That's great, and congrats on all of that. Funny story. I told this story yesterday too. My wife and I were at a really cool place here in Boulder called Corrida, more of a Spanish sort of vibe. Um, Brian Dayton owns that. He's part of the Frasca group, or he used to be, and then he broke out on his own. We're sitting at the bar, and I'm sitting. My wife is on my right. She leans in, whispers in my ear, and says, "Mark Vetri sitting right next to you." And I'm like, how do you know that? How do you know that? And he overheard it. He's like, yeah, I'm here. I'm visiting Brian and yada, yada, yada. I haven't gotten him on the show yet, but
Mark loves going to Colorado. Also, Mark brought Johnny or Bobby Stuckey. Yeah,
to the restaurant. Yeah, 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 yeah.
Omakase. I didn't know who he was at the time, but yeah, pre-COVID, he was there. So
Oh,
I
isn't
met
that
him.
great? That's great. I'm
Yeah,
gonna have to. Bobby's a good friend, and he's spoken at graduation, and he hires his team hires a bunch of our students. It's a high bar, right? But
yeah,
yeah, I'll tell him hi. He'll get a kick out of that.
yeah.
That's
He came
awesome.
music. Yeah, please.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Hey, before we dive in, and I promised my wife I would ask this, but can you talk a little bit about the sleeves, the tattoos? I mean, super,
Oh yeah,
super impressive from social media and stuff. And yeah, I'm just interested in your vision and how you go about and why you embrace the tattoos that you do.
yeah. Actually, I'll stand up for a second to show. I just got back
Oh,
from.
beautiful.
Yeah, my artist lives in London. I have a fresh one I just got on Saturday. I just got back from London on Monday.
Isn't that
Um,
something? Oh my
yeah, so
goodness.
it's like actually like more of a modern Japanese style, because the black parts are actually very like prominent, which is not so traditional. But this is Japanese. My artist, his name is Rodrigo Soto. He's lived in
Okay.
London for probably like, I don't know, 25 years,
Okay.
and he's pretty famous for doing these Japanese peonies. So I fly out to him to get these done, and I started actually last year Thanksgiving weekend. So it's been a year, and this so far I have 36 hours of ink done, and I probably have, I don't know, 20 more to go.
That's amazing. And so is there a historical significance specifically to the I'm going to call it radish, like my wall,
Yeah.
juxtaposed against the black? Is that a very traditional sort of pattern
Yeah, I mean, this is Japanese style.
style?
Japanese
Okay.
stuff fills in like everything.
Uh-huh.
This is a little more contemporary though, because of how black it is.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
black, very thick. But this is also, I think it's worth noting, this is my first tattoo. So my first tattoo, I flew out to London and started a sleeve, and wanted to do two sleeves. And that, I mean, for me, the meaning is not, these pieces don't have a huge meaning like the flowers. But
Okay.
for me, it's just about, I really wanted this my whole life, and my parents being, my mom's from Korea, my dad's from Japan, very traditional Asian parents. My mom cried for a whole year leading up to me getting this tattoo, begging me not to do it. And now when she sees me, she's like, "It's very beautiful. Please, please, no more." But it was just part of me, I think, kind of embracing who I am, because yeah, there's a stigma to being inked up like this.
No, I love it. And I appreciate your humility and your sharing. And let's talk about your family, growing up in the family business, and your mom and dad. I'd love to rewind your roots a little bit, specifically, growing up in your father's kitchen, Fuji. In an article that we pulled up in Eater, you said, "I loved it. I always loved the skill set you had to build. It was a creative outlet." And I'm going to take you further back. I grew up in a similar, scenario at my father and mother's, bakery in downtown Chicago. And, you know, there was some drama and then we came out to Colorado and, then you're cooking together in the same space. And, so good, bad, great too. Students walking by laughing at me, by the way. So let's go all the way back to when you were 14 and you're starting to do dishes. And I would love for you, in your words, to hear um, what it was like working not just at Fuji, but for your father. So here's a person who already had a reputation and a good business and a way that he had to run things, and then you come into it, and I'm I'm living vicariously through my own memories, and you had to fit in. And did you know right away? Big question. Know right away that this is what you were going to do, in spite of the good, the bad, and the ugly in the relationship.
Yeah, I mean, you growing up in that, you'll know exactly where I'm coming from. To preface, I do have to say that when I was 14, my parents divorced, and they owned a
Okay.
business. My mom ran the front, my dad was the chef. So me starting to work at 14 was also a way for my dad to see me more often. So that was also a catalyst to why I started at
Okay.
14.
Okay.
Um, yeah, because he wanted to, spend time with me since my parents divorced at that time. And yeah, I mean, I was 14 years old. I didn't really know what I was doing, but I started as a dishwasher, and you quickly learn that organizational skills and being like quick is very important in being a dishwasher. You really appreciate the job. I feel like every chef should start as a dishwasher,
Hmm.
because you really start to understand how critical that role is, and you start to develop fundamental organizational skills, just like system building of like, why I'm going to wash these plates first because they fit in the dish machine better, and I'm going to stack it this way. I'm going to, let it dry. So you have to build systems in your mind to be successful at it, instead of like getting buried during a busy service. But beyond that, it was, I mean, it was really hard working with my dad, because yeah, when you're family, there's less of a barrier to say how you're feeling. Especially, I'm the son, and he's my dad. I'm going to say how I feel. He's going to say how he feels, right? So that definitely caused some conflict, but it was also a nice way to spend time with the family. And even though my parents were divorced, they were both there. So yeah, I enjoyed it in the early years, definitely.
Well, I'm curious because you're, um, much more so than in my situation. Your father was a celebrated, successful restaurateur, right? And I'm curious if there are, and there were, and there still are some traditional skills, even if he didn't know it at the time, right? A certain way that he shaped how you cook and approach food today.
Absolutely. I mean, my dad is a classically trained chef from Japan. He
Hmm.
left his house when he was 16. His dad passed away, and then he left home from Kyushu, Japan, and started working around Tokyo and Osaka. And then came here in his early 20s to help open another very old Japanese restaurant called Sagami, which is still there. And then 3 years later, he opened Fuji. So, Japanese chefs are similar to like French chefs. They're just like they're kind of crazy, right? It's like
Well, we
there's a
all
lot
are. Yeah, yeah.
there's a lot of, especially at that time. I mean, there's a lot of technique. So he taught me all the fundamentals of Japanese cooking. Japanese cookery is very technical based, right? How do you cut? Which knives you use for which item? You know, there's a knife for every single thing. You want to
Yeah.
break down a fish, use a deba. You want to, do vegetables, you use this one, and you want to just slice something. Um, so he taught me all the fundamentals of, how to cut things, how to store vegetables, how to break down fish, how to make all the flavors for Japanese food. But more importantly, he also taught me the grit, the work ethic, because my dad, and even to this day, he just works, no matter what, he would just work through whatever, and you could be getting buried in service, but he just get through it,
Yeah.
and he just worked relentlessly. It's that grit, and that was definitely imparted onto me from him, and it's important to have that, you know, running a business, owning a restaurant, being a chef.
I love the story, first of all. Thank you. And I love the word grit, right? You don't you don't see it everywhere. It's hard to teach grit, right? And when I hear you speaking, I think back on, some of the things, my father, master pastry chef, came over from Germany in the 60s, and probably a very similar story. And I could remember, me coming on the scene and wanting to deconstruct his, Black Forest tort or his apple strudel. And, he just wasn't having it, right? He wasn't having it. But what he did teach me was that work ethic, just like you. He used to challenge me on questions like, before service, what do you do if the ice machine breaks down? Or what do you do if you lose power? What's your plan B? He used to think like that.
Yeah,
I'll never forget one time we always made, beef stock from bones that we could afford at the time. So we're spending 25 cents a pound for bones, and we did the best we could, but I would always, sneak veal base into the stock at the end. And it used to upset him so much, right? Like, why did you just go through this, 14-hour process of roasting bones and vegetables and slow simmering, and then you just, drop the veal stock in, or the veal base. So anyway, it brings back great memories. But I didn't know that I was learning at the time, and you probably didn't either. But we were learning at the time, and it's part of our DNA, and I love that. And are there any words of wisdom? Um, and I'll start it off with mine. You know, in the early days, we're all looking for recognition. You want more customers to come in, and you want them to call you a chef and all of that. And my father used to say to me in German, he would just say, just try to be a cook for life. Just be a cook for life. Other people
yeah,
will call you whatever they call you. Whoever signs your check, it doesn't matter. Just try to be a good cook for life. That's all he would say, right? And it stuck with me. How about your dad? Did he have some isms that motivated you or demotivated you?
one thing he always did say, I would just think back, is today is a new day. I mean, he would say that a lot.
Oh, I
I
love
think
that.
that's a lot of his philosophy, and I do think that's a beautiful way to view things. But also, my dad didn't. He was also a man of not many words in terms of how he taught. Was very. He showed you. He would show
Oh,
you,
I love that.
and like
Yeah.
if you felt a certain way, you would see it through his actions, right? I would say more so. It was there were a lot of lessons just learned from watching, because there was a lot of watching, and in
Sure.
Japanese learning, there's a lot of watching. I mean, if you watch Jiro Dreams of Sushi, they have to watch you like
Fabulous.
make
Fabulous.
rice like, for 2 years before you can even touch it. Right? Rice is the most actually the hardest part of sushi, but and we can get into that later. But yeah, it's more so just watching and learning patience and just seeing how hard someone works and then appreciating that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that today is a new day concept because you can, whether he meant this or not, you can take that even a little further. when you think about seasonality and sustainability and where your food's coming from. So every day truly is a new day, right? And can be. Love that lesson. So now you're 18. You're running the sushi bar. Um, Major milestone, I would imagine, based on what you just said about, just being able to cook the rice. Um, and bring it all together here, chef. What was that like for you? And by the way, you're also, in the process of earning a marketing degree from Rutgers while you're
Yeah.
working full time at your father's restaurant. Yeah, I'm just curious, and the students that'll listen to this, podcast, they probably love to understand how you managed that as a young person. Was education important to your father too? Was that really important that you got educated?
To both my parents is very important.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
they wanted me to go to college. I said I don't need to go to college, but they wanted me to. I only applied to two schools around here. I got a scholarship at one in Philly, but I got like almost a full ride to Rutgers. So I went to Rutgers, Jersey, and I just commuted. It was Rutgers, Camden, not New Brunswick. So I just commuted to work and or commuted to school and then went to work.
Hmm.
But to be brutally honest, I did not manage that time very well in the beginning because my first year of college, I kind of almost like failed out because I didn't study. I never studied. I never studied through high school. I took like a lot of AP courses and I was a B senior year as a C student. I just never studied. I never cared to but in college, I thought because like, all right, this isn't like an Ivy League school. It's just like my state school. It'll be simple, just like high school, right? And it was not. And I had to readjust how I organized my time. Also 18, I want to go out, see my
Have
friends.
fun.
Although
Yeah. Yeah.
I did not. I did not actually. I from 19 to 21, I don't really remember much. I think all I did was work and went to school. I don't have many memories of like what I did. I don't think I dated. Um, it's kind of a blur.
Hmm.
Uh, but it's very hard to do both. But having a business degree was a huge part of who I am today because um, you need to understand business principles to be a chef, or more so to have a restaurant. You need to understand marketing. You need to understand financials. Marketing is huge, and I didn't know at the time. But marketing, everyone thinks is just sales and like commercials, but marketing is actually how you communicate to your market. How do you like communicate your message and your value proposition to your customer? How do you find them? And how do they find you? And if you understand that, I mean, you can imagine how paramount that is to having a restaurant. Like, I have a $300 Omakase, and I also have this fun vibey Izakaya. It's two very different, very different markets, but actually the person who comes to both, there's so many the branding is very aligned, regardless of how differential it is in pricing. And I think about all that. Pricing is a huge part of marketing. It's the one, there's four P's in marketing, and pricing is one P that everyone always forgets because it's very mathematical based. But those are huge in me becoming who I am today.
Yeah. And I appreciate that. I was going to ask you what your studies, um, like what role that played in running Royal and understanding how to run a restaurant. And I I wonder too that do you believe that combination of studying marketing and growing up in a restaurant family, did that did that help or did that add pressure to your situation?
My When I was in college, it actually helped me really help my parents because at that time, that was during the financial collapse of 2008, 2009, and my parents' business was positioned more in the middle. It wasn't really cheap, high volume. It wasn't very expensive, intimate. It was in the middle. It was a Jersey suburban BYO restaurant that sells sushi and Japanese food. So it's not really cheap. It's not really expensive. And the middle gets crushed during any recession, right? because you don't have the margins or you don't have the volume.
Okay.
So when I was learning my all the things at school, I was actually applying it in real time at my parents' business. I created I started doing Facebook marketing. That's when Facebook was the main like way to communicate. Also email marketing, like eye contact and constant contact. Those were email platforms that you could like send messages out to your clientele. I rebranded the like menu. I like slimmed it down. I did a lot of things to just try to help streamline the operations, and it did like really help my parents in a really hard time. And it was like learning in real time of what I'm learning at school and then putting into practice at work. So I would say it was it was very important of leading to where I am today.
Do you do some of the social media? I'm looking at it right now. Do you do some of the social media yourself, or do you have a whole team that does that for you?
I do pretty much all of it.
Do you really? Yeah.
Yeah, I let my managers post on the Izakaya page. I personally run my own page. I take all the photos for everything you see on there.
Oh, do you?
Except,
That's awesome.
if
That's
someone
awesome.
else is doing a video or photo. Yeah, I have publicists, but they don't do anything with social media.
Okay. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, I mean, you have a lot of followers on both, both your personal and Royal Izakaya. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about your baby a little bit. Minimalism is a term that I've seen. Beautiful is the term I use. Um, how did the opportunity come about? And I'm really curious if you can go back to 2016. What was the response when you opened those doors? Was there a lot of, oh, the sun is now opening, or was it super welcoming, something new, a little bit of both?
Yeah. So 3 years prior, 2013, I was 20. I was 24. There were actually multiple. So because I was working the sushi bar at my dad's restaurant, I took care of a lot of people in restaurant business. There were actually a couple regulars who either owned restaurants in Philadelphia or had something to do with opening restaurants in Philadelphia. So three people actually approached me about doing something in Philly, and one of which was my business partner, currently David Frank and Steven Simons, who had just been regulars at my dad's restaurant for decades. Just like I said, Mark Vetri was a regular, George Perrier was a regular. A lot of the Philadelphia OG restaurant community went to my dad's restaurant, from the early days. And yeah, Dave Frank pitched it to me, and they kind of pitched it as a consulting thing because they had been wanting to open in Izakaya for a very long time, and it just never really came to fruition. But I said, if we do it, I want to come in as an owner. I want to sell my parents' restaurant, and I want them to come with me. So I got to take care of them, and I feel extremely fortunate for the opportunity because at that time it was really hard. I can remember because we were doing fine, but it was a small BYO and it was in Jersey, so we weren't doing like amazing, and there was no real financial long-term game I only saw me and my parents working every day for the rest of our lives, and my parents were in their 60s at that time, so I was just like, this is not sustainable. But at the same time, I wanted to do something that fulfilled my own personal ambition, right? But I also had to take care of my parents. I couldn't leave them behind. So this opportunity allowed both things to happen, and those are always and still my two main goals in what I do is to take care of my family, mainly my parents. I don't have kids or a wife, and to fulfill my own personal ambition. Those are my main two goals in whatever I do, and everything else is just subsidiary, extracurricular, icing on the cake.
Yeah,
um,
no, I love that. And I appreciate that. It's a really good message for young people or middle-aged people or old people who want to kind of get into the business. Ironically, our ground residential campus that student body is very young, 22, 23, 24 years old at the most. But our online students are definitely older, 25 to 45. They've done some different things. And so when they go to school, it's usually because when they go to school with us, it's usually because they've been thinking about it for a long time and they need that motivation. I've wanted to open a restaurant. I cooked with my grandmother, whatever it is, right? And so this is kind of a cliche question. I hate to ask it, but I think it's important. Um, number one, biggest challenges that you faced in those early days, and number two, um, were there some lessons that you learned the hard way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, also speaking of what you said about your students, young and maybe middle aged. One, if you're young and you're getting in for this for like fame, or you want to be on TV, or you want, whatever. I guess TikTok's a big thing. I'm not on TikTok. Those are all, I would say, artificial reasons that have no grounding. And when you do obtain those goals, if you do, then you'll feel very empty because it's a goal that is not very, it doesn't resonate in your core and like who you are. It's a very external thing. So I would say make sure you're doing it because you love it, or you really want to do this because it's who you are. And for the middle-aged people, I would say it's never too late to start. I've owned Royal for 8 years now, and even just in the last year, it's exponentially grown. I mean, there's never too late to start because you can accomplish so much in 5 years, I would say.
No, that's great. That's great. Really, really, really good advice. From your perspective, I'm wondering, so you went a lot of challenges, lessons learned, um, and please share more. What was the vibe that you wanted to create? The experience that we talked with Natalia a lot about, the customer experience yesterday. And have you achieved that, or are you still trying to achieve it, or are there lessons learned?
I mean, the vibe from the get-go was on point, I would say, and it's the same vibe that we created in the beginning. And the reception to opening was crazy. It was actually, I wish it wasn't as crazy because it was a little too much.
Yeah.
There was a lot of hype. I feel like my whole life is built around hype and meeting that expectation, which adds a lot of anxiety, but I live for this. So I live to execute, right? And I want to overachieve on what the hype is. I want to be more than that. In terms of lessons learned or just things I got wrong from the beginning, to those listening out there, big things are, you can't compromise on your values. That's a big thing. If you're the owner and the leader, you have to be strong in knowing who you are and what you stand for. Hopefully those are good values, good things. Be a good person. But you have to be a leader. You have to be like a figurehead. So it's always better to be of the higher standard and to create that culture that everyone's trying to lift each other up to be better, right? Learn how to do this better, learn how to cook better, make this service better. And the second it starts to become complacent, or you allow people to not kind of reach that level or want to reach that level, then it starts to skew the other way. And it becomes very easy to lose control of trying to be better, right? Because I feel like it's very human to always default to the lower standard because it's easy. It's easy. And you need in order to be a leader, you have to be strong, and you have to cultivate that want of like, hey, let's build a fire in your employees to let's be better, let's do better, and let's like make great delicious food and offer great service. And I would say that was very hard for me because also when I opened Royal, I was 27, and a lot of my employees were older than me, and I was still, looking back, I think I was kind of an idiot back then. I mean, I've changed so much, but I was very cocky. I thought I knew a lot. which now looking back, I don't think I knew a lot. I didn't know that much. I was a skilled, talented chef, but there's so much more than being a chef or being good at cooking. You have to know how to teach. You have to know how to lead, inspire people. These are really important qualities. I had an open Royal at the time I did. One, the opportunity was presented. Two, I had to take care of my parents, and this was something I had to do. But people who don't have to open a restaurant so quickly, I would say take your time and go work in other places and learn as much as you can to mature, because that maturity is so important in being the boss, right? So I would say that, like, if I could go back in time, I wish I could have waited 5 years, and I could have, like, maybe left Philly and worked around and learned from other people, because it's not just about learning how to cook. It's just learning how to be a person. It's learning how to be a leader, and that takes a lot of time.
Really, really well said. You said something really, really important and ironic. You said that you focus on execution. We talked before we started the show a little bit about the Philadelphia Eagles, and I'm a sports fanatic, and my 14-year-old boy is following me down that path. I went to the University of Oregon, so 12-0, number one team in the country right now. Their coach is Dan Lanning, and literally last night, Chef, last night, I was showing my son a video of him getting his, team pumped up, demonstrating leadership, and he said, "Lose the emotion, focus on execution. Lose the emotion, focus on execution." Which I'm now going to make my mantra right here. But it makes so much sense, right? You can get emotional about anything that you do. That's fine, but it's about execution. And and I want to parlay that into my next question that a lot of people may not really be familiar with, but the omakase, this concept of like the chef's table, if you will, or the chef's menu. Um, can you talk a little bit about how important that is in Japanese cuisine or in your restaurant specifically? Because you do a lot of that yourself, right?
Yeah, I mean, I personally do the service, feeding the 8 people, 8 people at a time, 16 people a night.
Uh-huh.
It is, I think, at this point, the most expensive restaurant in this city. It is probably one of the hardest reservations to get in the country at this point. Um, so there's a lot of expectation, and also it's a lot of people who come are regulars, and they have discerning palates, and they're not just coming to hang out with me. They're coming to have a great meal, and hopefully it's got to continue to evolve. And that is so much, pressure on me to continue on my journey of becoming better. How do I make this better? But omakase, it means to leave it up to the chef. So you are putting your trust into the chef that they're going to get the best ingredients and prepare it the best way that they can for you. And yeah, it's sushi in itself is just about the highest execution. That is one of the biggest differentiators from good to great in sushi. It's technique. It's technical execution at its core. Um, you can come up with different flavor profiles. You can come up with different dishes, but at the very core of what Japanese omakase is, and sushi omakase is rice. Is like, how do you make your rice? How do you season it? And your technique on that. That's not something you can buy. Anyone can go buy a nice fancy fish and spend a lot of money on a beautiful tuna and serve it just that night, and it'll probably be delicious. But how do you make the most amazing rice, the shari, that you can? That takes years, decades to learn. And when customers eat that for the first time and they haven't had that before, they can just immediately say, I have never eaten sushi before until this moment. And then they can only eat at a high caliber restaurant that does that. The rice has to be a certain temperature. The fish has to be a certain temperature. I mean, temperature is one of the most important ingredients in food that people don't think about. If something's supposed to be hot, be hot. Don't serve it lukewarm or cold. And something's
Sure,
supposed to be
sure.
cold, it should be cold, right? And rice is supposed to be warm, closer to body temperature, and the fish should be closer to room temperature. Shouldn't be frigid. And these highlight the nuances of the flavors, the textures. Um, yeah, so it's all about execution, all about technique.
I love that. And I want to kind of stay on the theme here. So I love, the menu created by the chef. I looked up and I'm not sure if this was your goal, but I looked up izakaya, and what I discovered is that term, it can be related to a gastropub. That would be the easiest thing to, but more than anything, it's a place to gather. Do I have that somewhat correct? Was that what you were shooting for when you opened up your first restaurant?
Yeah, no, it is similar to like a gastropub, a tavern, a place to gather. Izakaya literally means to stay and drink sake. It was based on sakaya, sake shops, hundreds of
Okay,
years ago. They started just offering little bites to keep guests there so they could drink the sake and eat something. So
sure.
that's what it turned into. An izakaya is a Japanese sake bar, a bar where they serve food. Um, and yeah, so I have this omakase inside of an izakaya. And I think that's what makes Royal very unique and comfortable for the guests, because you have that bustling, cool, dark izakaya all around the omakase. It kind of emanates into the room, the omakase room, because there's no walls separating it. There's just like a Norn curtain.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so yeah, I have all my music playlists that are, there's no sound system in the omakase room, but it's all coming into it. So it's all background noise, and that's what kind of relaxes the people there. Even though you're having this high end experience, it feels almost casual, you know?
You just mentioned music, so it triggers. Most of the chefs that I've had on the show, we laugh a little bit because we talk about, chefs. With chefs, it's motorcycles, maybe. So is it motorcycles for you?
I like fast cars.
Okay, I'll take that. I'll take that. And then music. So this is not on the script. So, but you mentioned it, so I got to go there.
Yeah,
Top
let's
three,
go.
top three bands of all time. Go.
Top three bands. Oh man, you put me on the spot. Lauren Hill. I would say Lauren Hill, Outcast. Oh man, there's so many rock people. I have to think about a third. There's too many.
No, I love that. Those are great responses right off
I
the.
love Lauren Hill and I love Outcast. And yeah, we'll come back to that
So
when I
yeah,
think of
come back to it. Yeah, so I get the vibe. I get the
what's
vibe
your
right
three?
away.
What's your
I
three?
I always go U2 first. I'm reverent of Bono and the band for many things, not just the music.
Yeah.
Um, Crazy off the cuff story. Years and years and years ago, I was at Red Rocks, just showing a friend the amphitheater. It was on a Saturday afternoon, and U2 was playing. I mean, this is a long time ago. This is the '80s, and
Yeah.
um, it was before the Rattle and Hum tour. I mean, it's a long time. It could have been Joshua Tree, probably was. And U2 was rehearsing. I mean,
Wow.
these days Bono had really long hair, and Edge had hair, and so we sat there in Red Rocks in that amphitheater by ourselves and listened to them rehearse for about an hour and a half. It was insane. It was insane. So there, and then beyond that, I'm a little bit of a blues. I mean, you're gonna laugh, but I love listening to Justin Timberlake and the
I do too.
Tennessee. I mean, just love it. It's so different, but I my drives my wife crazy because she's a Dave Matthews, hands down, no matter what, Dave Matthews, Dave Matthews. But no, I think it says a lot. You mentioned Bobby Stuckey earlier. He's got a really, really cool place in Denver called Sunday Vinyl, and
Mm.
he's really big into albums, and every night he selects, what album they're going to play, during service. And do you know Curtis Duffy, the name? Um, Chef in Chicago. He's got a place called Ever.
Oh, I know Ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So Curtis Duffy is a big, big music music fan. He's a friend of the school as well, and he's a little bit more Nine Inch Nails ish, right?
I love Nine Inch
Yeah,
Nails. I love.
yeah, yeah. So, but I I could do a whole podcast with a chef
You
about fast
should.
cars, motorcycles, planes, and music, right? Because it's part of there's
And
always
tattoos.
music playing and
Tattoos.
tattoos and tattoos. Yeah, Curtis is tatted up as well. Yeah.
I have a 700 horsepower Mitsubishi Evolution that I don't ever drive anymore since storage. I
I
am.
knew it. I knew it. I knew it.
I don't. I drive it like once a year for like 2 minutes.
Yeah.
My goal is eventually to join the New Jersey Millville racetrack when I'm
Yeah.
older. It'll be like my golf course, the
That's your
racetrack.
golf course. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a circuit. It's not drag, and I would love
Yeah.
to. I would love to go there on like Sundays and race. The adrenaline you get from racing and the turns,
Oh,
just understanding the apex and like braking is there's nothing like it. So I really enjoy that. And my third artist, I thought about it more as Al Green. It's definitely Al Green.
oh, yes. Yeah. I love
Yeah.
that you're thinking about it. I have to jot those down because I track these. I love it. I love it. Every Friday here at the campus, I send out the Friday morning dance party. So I pick the music and I send out a little YouTube video just to get people pumped up and going. I love
Music
that
is
conversation.
so important for the restaurant. On my music playlists, I listen to every single song and I build them. I
Yeah.
build the playlist. And what you have to, I think the main thing that if you own a restaurant is not all the music you like is right for your restaurant. And I
Yeah.
always myself of like, I love this song, but I can't play it. I like this artist, but just doesn't fit the vibe. Like you have to think of, to me, when I think of creating a restaurant, creating a vibe, I think of every diner as the main character energy, right? They are the main character in their own movie. And
Yeah.
when they're coming
Yeah.
to eat, it's a scene. And what does that scene look like? And how do you capture that feeling? And music is a huge part of that.
I love it. I love it. Wait, there's going to have to be a part two because, we should probably have in our curriculum the whole idea of how you create ambiance in a restaurant, right? From the architecture
Oh,
to the,
I mean, we're doing that right now for Dancerobot, and I'm just going crazy about it because
well, let's talk about it. That was next on my list. So that's
okay,
right there. That's right there in Rittenhouse, right?
yeah,
Right down the street. So, set to open next year. Can we talk about it?
yeah, it's set to open hopefully in the late spring or summer of 2025. It's in Rittenhouse on 17th and Sansom, which is an amazing location. It's on the same block as one of my favorite chef owners, Her Place Supper Club, Amanda Schulman.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
block over is Dizengoff by Michael Salmanov, and which is also he's also a good friend of mine. And yeah, Dance Robot, the name, right?
Yeah, yeah. I was just going to ask.
It is going to be a very high energy, fun Japanese izakaya, but also doing weekend brunch, so Japanese brunch, which no one does in Philadelphia, and a lot of like takes on Japanese comfort food, or alternatively takes on American comfort food but done Japanese, right? So there's actually no sushi there, which is
Okay.
huge. Finally, 8 years in, we can get away from having sushi or ramen. Like, oh my god, Japanese cuisine is so stuck to those things.
Well, because people like it, right? So you'll create a new genre. And what are you looking forward to the most with that expansion, other than no rice, no sushi?
I mean, we're gonna have to make rice, but
It
it won't be
won't
sushi
be
rice.
sushi rice.
Not
Yeah,
as
yeah,
technical. Um, you know what would if you read former art interviews or listen to older podcasts, I said I'm never probably gonna open something else. Um, the only way I was ever going to open something was if I was extremely passionate about it. And I told my business partners this years ago, I'm only interested in opening institutions, something that's going to be around 20 plus years. I'm not interested in management deals. I'm not interested in like, let's get in and out, which you can do. I want to open something that's going to be here 20 years later.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. That's noble. I love that. Right? It's
And it has
it's
to be something that's ambitious, something that isn't done yet. When I opened Royal Sushi Izakaya, there was no real izakaya or there was no sushi omakase yet in Philadelphia. It was the
yeah.
first one. and this will be the first of its kind where it's really just a Japanese restaurant without any sushi or ramen, and that just doesn't exist much
So
in
have others
Philadelphia.
followed you and tried to open up with similar concepts?
I don't own Omakase, the concept. It's been
Sure.
around
Yeah.
before me, but it definitely was. It ignited. It kind of sent the the beacon of saying like, all right, let's go. And I think
Yeah.
that's good for a city. I don't want to be the only one. I don't want to be
Yeah.
the only game in town. So
It's great
um,
for the city. It's great.
yeah,
Yeah. And it just raises the bar, right? It continues to motivate you as well. If you're comfortable with it, just to shift gears a tiny bit, because it's important. I'd love to talk a little bit about mental health, particularly in our industry. And you've been open about your journey, therapy, sobriety, the stress of restaurant ownership. Was Chef, was there a specific moment in your career that you realized that you needed to really focus on your mental health?
I would say a little over 4 years ago, I actually became sober fully. Um, December 1st was my 4 year anniversary for sobriety.
That's amazing. Yeah.
Huge. At that time, I also started seeing a therapist um, who specializes in drug addiction or alcoholism or that stuff. And but it became obvious that therapy and mental health is just huge, and I started realizing everyone should have this or try to have it. I know it can be expensive, so it's not the most accessible thing, but it's so important, all of us, because it's really hard to just be human. I mean, not sober or not, it's really hard to be human. You don't really know how to deal with emotions or conflict, and a lot of people I feel like self-medicate through many different things, not just drugs or alcohol. It could be shopping, sex, gambling, playing video games, eating. It could be anything that you're just like numbing yourself with. And I think a lot of people do that. It's just normal to try to like get away from the conflict or the anxiety or the bad feelings. And I think especially men kind of scoff at the idea of mental health, right? I know I used to, and I see it in my younger employees, especially the guys, when I kind of say like, hey, like, I think you should maybe see someone or talk to someone. And they're like, nah. I think it's really important and something we should, everyone should talk about how important it is, and to remove the stigma of it, because it only makes you better. It only makes you a better employee, a better employer, a better partner, friend, family, all of it.
Have ceramics? I loved reading that you were into photography, and now I know because you're putting some of it on your social media
Yeah, finally.
channels. And ceramic. Ironically enough, they're adjacent to we sublease a little space here, which is a ceramic studio for kids, as well as around the corner on the other side is a therapeutic ceramic studio for adults. It's actually a club. You have to, be a member, and it's super cool. How long have you been involved in those pastimes?
Since freshman year of high school, I
Oh,
just took
really?
as many
Wow.
photography and pottery classes as I could, and my teachers always told me that I should probably try to do it professionally, but I didn't. But I incorporated it into my professional world, and
Yeah.
it shaped how I look at food, and design and everything, which are all critical in owning a restaurant or being a chef.
Right.
Um,
Right. And flatware and plates.
oh my God,
Do
yeah,
you
I
find
love.
yourself going into a restaurant and immediately lifting up to see where they're buying where they're buying their things?
It's funny because when I go to a restaurant, I like a plate. I was lift it up and look at the back. I'm like, where's this from or what is it?
Yeah, I do too. I do too. I do too.
I obsess over dishware. If you ever can come to Royal one day, you'll see, especially the Omakase. I buy amazing ceramics and plateware and glassware from Japan, because it just like it lifts up the food. It elevates it so much.
And it tells a story, right? It gets people talking. I love that. And I will come. I will come. We'll drag
Yes.
Noel there as well and have a great time. Chef, we've kept you so long today. I'm so appreciative, but I can't let you go. The name of the show is The Ultimate Dish. And so, whether it's a memory or a specific 17 courses or just one dish in your mind, what is the ultimate dish?
I would say easy. Mexico City. There's this one taco stand. Um, they just braised the pig head and they chopped up all the bits, and it was a taco with all the braised pig head parts. And it was the most amazing thing I've ever eaten in my life, and I can't wait to go back to Mexico City.
Really? Really?
Yeah,
Corn tortilla?
yeah. It was so. I think a taco is like the most perfect thing.
Is I was not expecting that, but I love that response. I
Well,
absolutely.
sushi nigiri is technically a perfect bite, but
Yeah.
a taco you can implement a lot more things like meats and
Yeah.
temperatures. It's very different,
And
and
spice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I would say that's the ultimate dish. The thing I feel bad I didn't say is I didn't mention my chef as a business partner in the new restaurant.
You just said it. What's his name?
Justin Bacharach is going to be the chef partner at Dancerobot, and I'm excited. He's a friend, and he's worked at Royal Izakaya for the past 4 years as the chef of the Izakaya. So I'm very excited to have him, joining on board. I definitely
That
just wanted to mention that.
and with that, we're gonna say thank you, thank you, thank you. Much more success. So wonderful to meet you. Thanks for, being so transparent and honest and generous with your time. And I wish you a tremendous holiday and good luck with the new restaurant. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Kirk. You too. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Ultimate Dish Podcast, brought to you by Auguste Escoffier School of Culinary Arts. Visit escoffier.edu/podcast to find any materials mentioned during the podcast, including notes, links, and other resources. And if you can, please leave us a rating on Apple or Spotify and subscribe to support our show. This helps us reach more aspiring individuals ready to take the next step toward their dream careers. Thanks for listening.